Welcome to Outspoken here on All Sports Cleveland. I am your host every Tuesday from 3:30 to 4:30, James Mastrucci, and we had a pretty good show last week. At least I think we did. Touched on some baseball, which we'll talk about today. Touched about some basketball, again, we'll talk about today. But there's more of a pressing issue to talk about here to kick things off here, and that is Carl Nassib of the Las Vegas Raiders coming out as the first openly gay active NFL player. And that is a huge landmark moment for the National Football League and for the LGBTQ community as a whole. They're obviously first active, so that's the first thing that needs to be taken into consideration here, because let's be real here, whether you realize it or not, there have been gay NFL players before. You didn't know about them. They kept quiet because, as we saw what Michael Sam went through, times have changed for the better, but not even 10 years ago, having a gay player in the locker room was not something that was accepted by a lot of people. And so it's good to see things change. It's good to see times change. Carl Nassib also made a $100,000 donation to the Trevor Project, which is a massive contribution, and it's a great thing to see from someone of his status, of make the statement he's making, make the contribution to the Trevor Project that he has made. And he even said it wasn't something he necessarily planned on doing, but he went ahead and did it anyways. June is Pride Month, so it is something that it's an important milestone for the NFL and the sports world as a whole. And so I know there's been lots of negative comments out in the world. Let's be real here. And there's been other people who are saying, well, this guy's going to get cut, but they don't really know the history of the Raiders now, do they? Because the Raiders have been one of the first organizations historically to make those landmark decisions, to take that step outside the box that no one else is willing to take. They hired Tom Flores as the first minority head coach. Amy Trask worked for the organization for 16 years under Al Davis. She was the CEO of the Raiders. So when you look at the Raiders, you look at Carl Nassib, this is probably the best organization for him to be a member of at this moment in time because of that history, because the fact that they're, able to handle any sort of flack or backlash that a member of their organization will get. They're there to support Carl Nassib. And as Nassib said, his players, coaching staff, the organization, the NFL, has all been supportive of his decision here to come out of the closet. And they've been supportive of him as an individual, which I think is an even more massive news story than just the supporting the coming out of the closet portion. Because support for, gay athletes has not been great. There are still it's still an uphill climb. Let's put it that way. It's still an uphill climb for a lot of people who are part of the community, and it's not easy, because you still have people who come with the slurs and the hateful speech, and I'm sure this is one of those times where it's great not to have Twitter, because Carl Nassib doesn't, and he does have Instagram, that's where he posted this, but I don't think he's all that active on it. Maybe that'll change with this. Maybe he'll be a little bit more vocal, maybe he won't, but that's his decision. But either way, this is a landmark moment for the National Football League and the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, staying in line with the Pride Month stories here, this is something that came across this morning, and that was over in Europe. The Union of European Football Associations, or UEFA, has rejected Munich's request to light up the Allianz Arena in rainbow colors during Germany's match against Hungary, saying it is a politically and religiously neutral organization. UEFA is saying that. The mayor of Munich has proposed the gesture as a protest against Hungary's new law banning the sharing of LGBTQ content to minors. So, this is tricky. And here's why it's tricky, because UEFA can honestly just go out there and ban Germany from competition, because that's just the way that things unfortunately go. But this is kind of the other side of the spectrum here from the story with Karl Nassib. Even still, when the world thinks, or what seems like the world has taken so many strides forward to be progressive, to be accepting, you still have moments like this. Moments and instances where an entire country is banning LGBTQ content to minors. And, Germany wanting to show a little bit of support for the community was wanting to do it. And I think that would have been a great gesture. I think that would have been something absolutely fantastic to do, something to show that for a lot of people that they're not alone out there, that they have the support of a country. But it's very frustrating to see when you try to see that everyone's made all these steps forward and you still see this. They did say and suggest that the stadium can be lit up on another day, not match day, so as to not be seen as a political commentary on the policy of government of a Euro 2020 nation. But honestly, that's an empty gesture. That's an empty statement. That's an empty suggestion. What we really need is to be able to see countries show their support, especially during June. June this is a very important month for the LGBTQ community, and it's one that the sports world has not had the best relationship with. So when you try and see certain organizations, certain groups in the sports community try and bridge that gap and get the pushback, it's very disheartening. And it honestly, the sooner the pushback ends, the better it will be for everyone involved. I mean, it was just a few weeks ago that, I know it's a different sport, but the San Francisco Giants wore their Pride hats and Pride logo on the uniform. And they were the first Major League Baseball team to do that. So that was an example of a movement in the right direction, of a team and a league showing the support for the community that it needs. And again, I know it's a different sport. I know it's a different country. I know it's not seen as a political statement against another country in international competition. However, I think UEFA and FIFA, for that matter, would be wise to take a note from those over here at Major League Baseball and all the other sports that do allow their teams and players to make a statement like this, a statement of support, a statement of pride. I think they would be wise to allow those teams to do that, because it's not easy being in the sports world and having to deal with nonstop prejudice and hate speech, and sometimes it can be very overwhelming, and that's why a lot of times you see unfortunate endings to the way things work here, and that's either players calling it a career or even worse, which makes Karl Nassib's massive donation to the Trevor Project so important. People really need a place to turn to, and having an organization like the Trevor Project, having that resource available to them, is massive. I know this has been a little bit of a shorter opening segment, but you know what? This was something important to me that we really needed to get into, and I really wanted to touch on. But we're going to head to a little bit of an early break. But when we come back, we're going to come back with some baseball updates and with the Cleveland Indians here on Outspoken on All Sports Cleveland. Welcome back to Outspoken here on All Sports Cleveland at the Ohio Media School. I am your host, James Mastrucci, and before we get into the next topic, real quick, this is a tweet from Bo Jackson just about an hour ago. Proud of Carl Nassib on coming out yesterday, the hashtag Raider Nation, the whole country, and I stand with you. It's great to see a Raider legend out there showing support for a current Raider. Not to get too deep into it, but back in the day when the Browns weren't a team and I was living in Michigan and rooting for the Lions was not something that I really wanted to undertake. Rooted for the Raiders a little bit. Raiders were, they're a fun team. It was something different. So I do have a soft spot for the Raiders historically, and I always kind of do. And the fact that they're out there in Vegas now, they seem to have really taken a hold to the Raiders as their team. So it's pretty cool. So, huge to see the shout out from Bo Jackson there on Twitter. Now, going into baseball, kind of a disastrous weekend, borderline panic mode for the Cleveland Indians. They dropped 2 out of 3 to the Pirates, which is unacceptable by every measure of the word. And so they are able to come away with a very narrow win on Sunday. Then last night they were in Chicago to take on the Cubs, and they were able to come away with a 4-0 win. They shut out the Cubs. Bobby Bradley and Josh Naylor were the heroes in that one, both hitting home runs. Bradley with a Oppo Taco, muscled that thing over the left center field fence, and Josh Naylor clobbering one to right center of his own. And the final run of the game came on a wild pitch where Cesar Hernandez came around to score. It was actually the second consecutive wild pitch for Cubs pitcher Tommy Nance, so that was a little bit wild. But it was great to see them come away with a win. They play again tonight, and that's the end of their series with the Cubs for the season. They have a chance to win the season series here because they took 2 earlier in the season. So, come away with the wins, get the 4 wins over the Cubs. That'd be pretty awesome. It'd be really great just to see the Indians continue their winning ways, even though they're still trailing just a bit in the standings behind the White Sox. But, the phrase, they won the battle but lost the war, kind of applies to last night's win. Aaron Savale was the pitcher, but he had to leave before the 5th inning was over with a injury to his middle finger on his pitching hand. Not good. They were able to cobble together some innings from, the likes of Brian Shaw, Nick Whitgren, Manuel Clase, James Karinchak, the usuals. But this is just more pressure, more tension, more being placed on the shoulders of their rotation, which is mainly comprised of replacement individuals. Just a week ago, when I was talking about Shane Bieber, I was talking about unlikely heroes needed to step up. That still applies today. It applies even more. Even more unlikely heroes are going to need to stand up and contribute. They're going to need to come up to the bigs, get on the mound, and shove. That's what they're going to need if this team's going to be able to continue their winning ways. Because somehow, even with all their pitching injuries, they're still only 2 games back of the White Sox as of this show here at 3:47 on a wonderful Tuesday here just outside Cleveland, Ohio. So I don't know how they're doing it. I really don't, because now they're down Savale, now they're down Shane Bieber, now they're still down Zach Plesac. And what they've gotten out of some of their other pitchers this season has left a lot to be desired. I mean, sure, Tristan McKenzie has some stuff and he's shown some bright spots, but he's also shown that he walks guys a lot. I mean, you really weren't expecting the team to rely on, Eli Morgan, J.C. Mejia, and Cal Quantrill at any point this season. I mean, that's not to mention, guys like Sam Henches and Phil Maton, who's taken on a pretty big role, as well as pretty much anyone that, you can just throw a dart at on a dartboard that's in their organization. So the fact that they just keep doing it, it's simply amazing. But speaking of Plesac and Bieber, they're both still out. But specifically Plesac, Savali's he's supposed to be meeting with the same specialist, hand specialist to be exact, that Zach Plesac and Roberto Perez have both saw for their own injuries, and neither player is back yet, so I'm a little bit worried, only because, first of all, seeing a specialist is never a good sign for an injury to begin with, but seeing a specialist that two other members on the team have already seen and they're still not back from their injuries doesn't necessarily give me a whole lot of hope for a quick return for Savali. But, who knows? Who knows? Maybe it's just nothing big. Maybe it's just a little thing. Maybe he spends a short stint on the injured list and he's back, because that would be great. But speaking of guys who could be back, Franmil Reyes is beginning a rehab stint with the Columbus Clippers, the AAA affiliate of the Cleveland Indians. And that is a bat this offense really could use right now, because, we're getting some good contributions out of Josh Naylor. He's starting to get a little bit hot right now. And Bobby Bradley, he came in scorching hot, settled down a little bit, but he hit a home run last night, so possibly things are going back in the right direction for him. But this is an offense that really has not been particularly good this year, considering that a lot of their main bats have struggled or just flat out failed to produce. You've seen lots of roster turnover for this team. We've seen lots of changes, lots of different combinations, guys playing at different positions. A week ago, their run differential was negative, but it's back positive again, +7. A couple good wins earlier in the week, or later in the week last week, helped do that. But they are still 81 runs below the White Sox as far as run differential goes on the year, and it's concerning. It's concerning that the run differential is just a positive single digit. I believe, yes, they are. They are the only team with a single digit positive run differential, and they're the only team who has a run differential. Let me try that again. They have the lowest run differential that's positive in all of baseball. There is the negative run differential, the 0 run differential for the New York Yankees with their winning record. But as far as teams go with winning records, they have the lowest positive running differential for any team with a winning record, which it's concerning. It makes you wonder how sustainable what they've got going on is, because their offense has not been particularly good at any point really this year. And now they keep getting hit with more and more injuries on that pitching staff. And you had to ask or think, when do things stop going their way? Because they're 26th in batting average. They've somehow kept the strikeouts down. 25th out of a possible 30 for strikeouts, so they're on the other side of that list. So the sixth fewest in baseball, but they don't hit home runs. They're in the middle of the pack. They have 84. They don't drive a whole bunch of runs in. Middle of the pack, they're at 18. Maybe some things would go and change their way, but looking at their offense, they need help in the worst way possible. So that means, that one of those 2-week stretches where Jose Ramirez just goes on a tear, Josh Naylor continued to heat things up, Bobby Bradley gets on a hot streak, possible return of someone like Franmil Reyes. That would be so perfect. Maybe some of the other guys. Eddie Rosario is someone who still hasn't caught fire yet, because there's going to be a moment in time where he's just going to clobber 5 home runs in a week. We haven't seen that yet. So it's going to be one of those times, one of those runs that will give you a good idea of what this team's capable of. And it's just one of those things we haven't seen yet. They've managed to sustain and managed to keep their heads above water, but you kind of wonder how's it going to keep going. But credit to them, credit to Terry Francona, credit to the team. They managed to keep things going, and I think part of that is some great pitching overall from guys in the organization. Some of that is also the fact that the White Sox are missing a couple of their key players, a couple of their key bats. I mean, Luis Roberts out, Eloy Jimenez is out, Nick Madrigal out. So that's playing a factor in the overall, I guess, standings race in the American League Central. The fact that Cleveland is still only 2 games back, despite all of their injuries and their lackluster offense, and the fact that, they've been just kind of a meh team to watch at times. So, however they manage to compile their pitching staff moving forward, however they manage to keep putting together some sort of offense, whether that's with some of their younger guys stepping up or some other guys coming back to the lineup, it's going to be an interesting just a little over a month until the trade deadline here. So see how they handle that. I know I mentioned the possibility of a soft sell last week. I still think that is something that could happen if things go wrong. And that was mostly based off the fact of the injury to Shane Bieber, and they had Aaron Savali left. Well, Aaron Savali's not here anymore. So you got to think, is this the moment where things stop going their way? But they got one more game against the Cubs this evening before they have an off day on Wednesday, and then they continue their schedule, which isn't necessarily all that friendly. Because you look at who they're going to be facing, it's not going to be the Pirates and Orioles again. They're heading to Minnesota, and I know Minnesota's underperformed this year, but they're still a team capable of that. But then they get a little bit of break. They play Detroit, then Houston, Tampa, and Kansas City, and that brings us to the middle of July. That brings us to the All-Star break, really. So Tampa is a team that's been up and down. Kansas City is always capable of getting headaches. But we got to see how things all sort themselves out, and we can have a pretty good idea of where this team stands. I mean, the only team here that's really should be a cakewalk is Detroit, and you don't know, really, because Minnesota is underachieved, but, I mean, they could get hot at any moment, honestly. Houston's doing their thing down in Houston. Tampa Bay is Tampa Bay, and Kansas City's always annoying. So we'll have a pretty good idea by the All-Star break. But we're going to head into a commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to be discussing, I say we, it's going to be me, but it's going to be we because you're going to be here listening to me. We're discussing the NBA playoffs now. Things are unfolding out there in the Western Conference and the unlikely Eastern Conference matchup that we got coming our way. So that's on the other side of this break at the top of the hour here on All Sports Cleveland. Welcome back here to Outspoken here on All Sports Cleveland. A couple of updates here I want to give you. Number one, we do not have an update from the Indians on Savale, who was visiting Dr. Thomas Graham in Dayton after injuring his finger last night. That is from Tom Withers of the Associated Press. And going back to our top story at the show, Adam Schefter tweeted the following: Raiders defensive end Carl Nassib is the top-selling NFL jersey across the Fanatics network both yesterday and today. That is just so great to hear that, the sports world is supporting him. You know what? I might have to go out and get myself a Carl Nassib jersey. Like I said earlier, I used to like the Raiders when I was a kid. Never got a Raiders jersey. Why not now? Honestly, why not now? Someone tell me why. But anyways, like I said just before the break, we are talking NBA playoffs, and last week I was talking about the Nets. I was talking about the Hawks, and the Nets are done. The Hawks took out the Nets. I can't really believe it. I said the one thing that could have took that team down was injuries, and that's basically what happened. And I think pretty much everyone knew that the only thing that was going to stop them was an injury, and credit to the Hawks. I mean, they're overachieving. They're the team I don't think anyone expected to get here. They weren't favored to win in round one. They certainly weren't favored to beat the Nets. And now they're here. They're in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Milwaukee Bucks. We'll get to them in a second. But the Hawks, I don't I think they're a year early, maybe 2 years early. But kudos to them. I mean, they're doing a fantastic job, and especially in a situation where I don't think anyone really expected them to get there. But the Nets. Let's talk about the Nets for a moment here. Kevin Durant put up one hell of a performance where he had the triple-double, where James Harden was basically a decoy for the entire game. But what we really learned is that without having a viable second player, even a third player, it's not going to work for Brooklyn, and that's what happened. That is exactly what happened. But I know a lot of people aren't mad that the Nets are done, and I mean, I wasn't really rooting for or against the Nets. I just was rooting for a good series, rooting for good games, because when you're not a fan of either team, and I know a lot of people, especially here in Cleveland, still have a lot of hatred towards Kevin Durant for what he did following 2016, and that's understandable, but I'm not really concerned with that all that much. So the Nets being done, not really, I guess, heartbreaking to me. Not really something I was rooting for, but just an interesting storyline overall. But let's talk about the Bucks and Sixers. I don't know where to start with here, but the Bucks are now facing the Hawks, and I think the Bucks should win this series. But the Bucks, I don't think they're the slam dunk pick that everyone thought they were going to be. And the Hawks aren't a pushover like as many people thought they were going to be, especially against the Nets. So we could have an interesting series between the two teams. I don't know who's going to win. I don't have money on this, but my bet would be the Bucks, only because I just think the Bucks are the better team overall. I think they're certainly the better team overall. I think that they should win fairly easily. Luckily for the Hawks, they're not. I think they would have a better chance against the Sixers. But they got to take on the Milwaukee Bucks. But let's talk about the Sixers now for a second. Because, good God, what is going on with Ben Simmons and the Sixers? It's not just the pass he made down low when he should have took a shot a foot away from the rim. It's the fact he took only 3 shots in the entire fourth quarter of that 7-game series. That's what's concerning. Because, sure, he is an incredible passer. He has a lot of the secondary skills that you want in a player. And he can score a little bit. But if he can't shoot, it doesn't matter. No one's going to be afraid of him. And that's what it is. You have a player who won't shoot the basketball. I saw a stat where 99% of his field goal attempts in his career are two-pointers. It's like 98.9, but basically 99. And the overwhelming majority of those are from inside 10 feet. So you have a guy that doesn't shoot. I mean, he's taking like layups and like putbacks, I guess. Layups, dunks, putbacks, short shots. He's not taking anything of distance. And when he's not taking anything at distance, and you have a really good center in your team in Joel Embiid, that makes things a bit messy offensively. And that's kind of where the Sixers are. And they're going to have to make some decisions on what they got going on with their roster construction. Because I don't know where the Sixers go from here. They need to do something. Because I know a lot of people are talking about, the process has failed, all this other stuff. Yes, if you want to look at it from that perspective, it did. But the process really ended a few years ago. They were trying to be on the other end of the process. This was the time for the process to produce. But you don't know where the Sixers go from here. I feel a trade's necessary for Philadelphia to take that step forward that they just don't seem to be able to take. And I think they've made some mistakes along the way. Banking on Ben Simmons to develop as an offensive player seems to be one of them, because he's regressed. He really has. Shooting-wise, scoring-wise, he's just not I think, what they were hoping for. So I think that's something that Philadelphia needs to take into consideration as they look to try and overhaul or reshape their roster and try to avoid an all-out teardown of what they've tried to put together here. So that takes us out west. That we got the Suns and Clippers. So the Clippers advanced. The Suns swept. Game 2 is tonight. Phoenix leads the series 1-0, and they are favored by 4.5 points. I think the Suns should come out on top again. I don't know about Suns in 4, but Suns taking a 2-0 lead, I think, is going to happen, and that'd be halfway there to Suns in 4. But some important news here. No Kawhi Leonard for the Clippers and no Chris Paul for the Suns. So in a way, that kind of cancels each other out a little bit. So that brings us to everyone else. So that's going to be, Paul George, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton. Those are the guys that are going to be making the impact here tonight in Game 2. But in my eyes, in my opinion, Phoenix is still the team of destiny. At some point, Chris Paul will come back and help them out. Whatever point Kawhi Leonard returns, not quite sure how much that's going to change, because I think the Clippers are a good team. However, I don't know if they're good enough to get over the hump that they have not been able to at any moment in time the past. For how long? It's been a while now since they had Blake Griffin and Chris Paul on their team. So it's been a minute, and I'm not sure this version of the Clippers are going to be able to do it, because even with Kawhi Leonard, it's just, I don't know what it's going to take for them to turn things around to get to the finals and win a title. Because I look at that team, and I think Paul George is a good, not great player. I think Kawhi Leonard's a great player. But I think they don't have the right supporting cast to make that work. And I'm not sure they have the right coach to make it work. Now, Ty Lue is someone who's great at managing egos, but as far as everything else is concerned, I'm not sure. Because when he was successful here in Cleveland, he had LeBron. And as soon as LeBron was gone, everything fell apart. And now he's in LA, and he has Kawhi Leonard and Paul George on his team. So I'm not quite sure how much of a X's and O's strategy contribution they're really getting from Ty Lue. But again, I don't really follow the Clippers that close. So it could be something. It's just the vibe I've gotten from the experience we've had here and the overall perception of him as a coach doesn't seem like he's necessarily hands-on, I guess. It seems like he's great at managing the players, the player manager. He seems great at that. I'm not sure how good he is at everything else that being a coach, I guess, involves. So, again, I still think Phoenix is the team of destiny. I think they will win this series. Maybe Suns in 4. Maybe Suns in 4 guy gets himself another moment here. Because wouldn't that be wonderful to see that guy get another moment in the sun? But when we come back, because we're going to head to a break here before we come into our last segment, which is usually a little bit longer. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the Cavs with potential trade options on the table, and the NBA draft lottery, which is taking place this evening. Do the Cavs really have a chance? So stick around here on Outspoken on All Sports Cleveland. Welcome back here to Outspoken here on All Sports Cleveland, and I have another update in regards to Carl Nassib. Toni Morrison from Good Morning America has reported that the NFL will match Carl Nassib's $100,000 pledge to the Trevor Project. That is just great to see. I mean, you heard that Carl Nassib say that he's got support from his organization. He's got some support from the NFL. And it's great to see them to take that step forward and be very generous and make that sort of donation to the Trevor Project. So I'm sure we'll get some more updates on information regarding this story as time goes on. But let's start here, because one of the things we touched on in the last topic was Ben Simmons and the Philadelphia 76ers. And as soon as you heard that the team might be looking to trade him or they got to do something, anyone and everyone decided to be like, oh, the Cavs should go after Ben Simmons. The Cavs should go after Ben Simmons. He's a great player. I'm not arguing his talent. What I'm arguing is, does his skill set actually raise the ceiling of the team? Because I propose that it raises the floor. It takes it a little bit better so the team's not as bad. Maybe they don't lose as many games. Maybe they don't lose by as much in some of those games. But they're still not necessarily a good team. But does that ceiling, does where they could be, really change all that much? And I'm not sure it does. Because you look at who the Cavs currently have on their team. So let's just take Kevin Love out of the picture for the moment here. So they have Darius Garland, Colin Sexton, Isaac Okoro, Jared Allen, who is a restricted free agent. And so those are the young guys they're, at this moment, looking to build around. Now, if they have to make a trade, that means one of Garland or Sexton is going away, along with another player and some draft picks, and maybe a third team gets involved as well. But the thing to take into consideration here is you look at it, and how much better does the team get without one of Sexton or Garland on the team? Now, I think it would be better if this trade were to happen if they move Sexton, not Garland, but who knows if Philly actually wants Colin Sexton. The issue at hand is that the team right now has two players projected to be in their starting lineup who are not necessarily dynamic offensive threats, those being Isaac Okoro and Jared Allen. Allen is a center. He's a big man. He doesn't stretch the floor. Isaac Okoro is a developmental offensive player who honestly reminds me a lot of Tayshaun Prince. And that's, I think, what he's going to be at some point in his career, is a Tayshaun Prince type. Defensive first, contributes when he can, offensive type player. So when you have those two guys already out on the floor, why would you have another guy who really necessarily can't shoot out there? So that's going to be 3/5 of your starting lineup who's not necessarily a threat from shooting the ball from far away? That's just not good team building. You think about it, it would be better if Garland was in the mix instead of Sexton. Because with Sexton, it's already a ball-dominant player. And Simmons is a ball-dominant player as well. Garland can at least pass and run an offense, while Sexton, I really don't think he can. And still wouldn't even be a good fit with Garland, just be better than Sexton, honestly. But you got to think who they would have to give up. It would have to be one of Garland or Sexton. It would probably be Garland. And probably Love in draft picks to get Ben Simmons and the offense not being any better. At least better in the way it needs to be better, which is shooting the ball and making three-pointers. And that's not necessarily something that Ben Simmons is good at. So at least Colin Sexton can make threes from time to time. Same with Darius Garland. Sexton's a little bit of a better three-point shooter. So the one thing that I would say is if they could somehow make an acquisition or a trade for Ben Simmons and get another player. Maybe they somehow swing a deal where they land Simmons and C.J. McCollum. You see them move on from both Garland and Sexton and Love and draft picks. That would not only raise the floor of the team, it would raise the ceiling, because you could justify to me a way that this team could work with those two, because you have proven guys. Maybe you do a sign and trade with Jared Allen to shake up the roster a little bit, because let's be honest, if the Cavs roster isn't something that they should be, holding tight to and be like, no, we can't trade these guys, because they haven't really shown anything as a whole to be like, hey, you need to keep these guys. There's been some moments, there's promise, sure. But you look at it and you think, Why? Why would you hang on to these guys when you can get better, more proven guys if possible? I mean, yeah, I'm not big on Simmons, but I could be talked into Ben Simmons if it comes along with CJ McCollum or somebody like that. Something where it helps refresh the roster. Something where it's not just one player. Because if it's just Simmons, I think that would be very bad. If it was just McCollum, I'd be very happy. I could live with the Simmons and McCollum deal, but just Simmons on his own, just not a good option for the Cavs. Which brings us to this evening and a possible draft asset, their first round draft pick. The draft lottery is tonight. And let's be real here, the Cavs don't have any real chance at the top pick. Come on. There's no way the NBA is going to let it be the Cavs have another number 1 overall draft pick that they will eventually have leave town. So looking at their draft odds, their best odds is for the 7th overall pick. That's 25.5%. Second best would be the number 6 pick, 18.2. After that, it's descending from 1 to 4, so 11.5% for 1, 11.4 for 2, 11.2 for 3, and 11 for 4. Then number 8 is 8.6, number 5 is 2, and number 9 is 0.6. That's as low as they can get. It seems like number 7 is going to be their destiny, and oh god, another pick in that 5, 6, 7, 8 range. It's not going to help them, because what the Cavs really need is they need to get lucky, and they need to be in the top 3 for the lottery, preferably number 1, but like I said, probably not going to happen. So I'm not sure just exactly how it's going to go, because they need a franchise-altering player. They need a player who takes the team and transforms the organization. They've had a couple of those guys, LeBron, Kyrie come to mind. They did draft Andrew Wiggins, who hasn't really turned out, but they were able to turn him and flip him for Kevin Love, which helped them win their title. But the Cavs have a 45.1% chance to win or to land a top 4 selection in the NBA draft. And I have like zero faith in this happening. I really do. The Cavs have gotten so many high draft picks in the past. I mean, at one point they had 1 and 4, and they took Irving and Thompson, and then they won it with Bennett, and they blew that pick. Then they took Wiggins. They had LeBron before that. I don't see if the Cavs end up with the 1, 2, or 3. I have the feeling the NBA is going to be like, that was just a practice. That one wasn't for real. We can't let this. Let's redo. That doesn't count. This happened. This happened over there. We got to redo it. This version doesn't count. I would like to be wrong. I would love to be wrong, because the one thing the Cavs need is a franchise-changing player, and the best chance to get one of those guys is with the number 1 pick. Sure, number 1 picks don't always turn out. A lot of times they're not what you expect them to be, and players drafted later in the draft. So, and in the areas where the Cavs have picked the past couple years or even past that, turn out to be significantly better players. That happens all the time. But it's more about having the opportunity to draft one of those top players that I'm interested in than I am in hoping that the right player falls to them, because even when the right player has potentially fallen to them, they haven't taken him. I mean, because looking at their recent draft history, dating back to when LeBron left for the second time. So when 2018 was their first draft pick, first draft pick period in almost in 3 seasons, and they took Colin Sexton at 8 overall. Colin Sexton's a fine player. You can argue that for the 8th overall pick, it's been a success, but he's not a starter, and they need starters. 2019, they took Darius Garland and Dylan Windler, and they also got Kevin Porter Jr. in that draft, who's no longer with the team. But Garland, again, successful pick, not necessarily not the best player in that draft. He's a really good player, I think, has the potential to be. I don't know what they're going to get out of Dylan Windler, because Dylan Windler looks like he's just going to be injury prone all the time, but I wish that changes. But last year I took Isaac Okoro at 5th overall. It just seems like they keep getting stuck and locked into that 5th to 8th spot, even though they continue to be one of the worst teams in basketball. And it really just speaks to my frustration I have with the draft lottery process. The goal with teams who are bad, or for the easiest way for teams that are bad or in small markets to turn their team around or franchise or their fortunes, is to end up with a top draft pick, get one of those franchise-altering players. But when you have a lottery system and you have teams that can jump everyone, it sets everyone back a little bit. And it's always just been something I've been frustrated with. And I don't think it's going to change anytime soon, but who knows? Maybe Adam Silver and changes his mind, and I would hope he does. Maybe another ridiculous draft lottery happens and something stupid happens, and the Cavs end up with the 9th pick and cause a big fuss. But either way, I'll pay attention to the draft lottery, and when they end up with some pick in the 5, 6, 7, 8 range, I'll be like, I knew it. And yeah, then we'll have to be like, okay, let's examine mock drafts. We have them taking a whole bunch of people that the average fan hasn't heard of before, but that's usually how it goes. And so draft lottery should be a source of interest. It should be something to monitor. I'll definitely tune in this evening to find out where the Cavs are. But this has been another Tuesday, as it is approaching 4:30, and this show is wrapping up here. I am your host, James Mastrucci, always here every Tuesday from 3:30 to 4:30 on All Sports Cleveland. The video and audio will be posted to YouTube either Wednesday or Thursday, as I try to edit all those together. That is on my YouTube channel with a Jimitude. Go ahead and subscribe, check that out. Follow me on Twitter at Jimitude. Check out all of my stuff that I got posted on thisisbelieveland.com. That's the host. It's the best place to find all of my content that I have there. But this has been a great Tuesday, and I will see you next week here on All Sports Cleveland at the wonderful Ohio Media School just outside Cleveland, Ohio.